Declan, a former basketball star, lived cloistered in his garage, his life defined by broken machines and bitter silence. But when a mangled scooter and a hopeful boy appeared, his world began to shift. Could repairing their broken toys, and ultimately their broken team, mend the man he thought was beyond fixing? The world for Declan, aged 32, had shrunk to the four concrete walls of his garage. It was a world measured in the smell of grease and metal, in the precise clicks of a socket wrench, and in the low, constant hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. The large roll-up door was almost always kept down, a steel curtain separating his cramped existence from a neighborhood he no longer felt a part of. This was his life after the accident. The screech of tires, the impossible angle of the guardrail, and then nothing. The legs that had once powered him down a basketball court, that had allowed him to leap and pivot with explosive grace, were now still and uncooperative, anchors tethering him to the worn leather of his wheelchair. His hands, which once commanded a basketball with fluid grace, now moved with a different kind of certainty. They danced over sputtering lawnmower engines and tangled bicycle chains with the detached focus of a surgeon. He didn't enjoy the work, but he understood it. Metal, unlike muscle and bone, obeyed predictable laws. It didn't betray you. In the far corner, shrouded in a thin veil of dust and cobwebs, sat a basketball. It was a relic from another life, another man. He never touched it. One Tuesday afternoon, a jarring rattle of cheap plastic and metal broke the silence. The sound scraped against the bottom of the garage door, followed by a hesitant knock. Declan sighed, wiping his hands on an already blackened rag. He wheeled himself over and lifted the door just enough for a pair of scuffed sneakers to become visible. "What do you want?" His voice was rough from disuse. A boy of about 12, with a spray of freckles across his nose, peered into the dim space. He was nervously clutching the handlebars of a scooter whose front wheel was bent at a sickening angle. "Mr. Henderson, my mom said. She said you fix things." Declan's gaze fell on the mangled scooter, then back to the boy's hopeful face. Every part of him wanted to say no, to drop the door and return to the predictable silence. But the boy didn't flinch from his stare. He just stood there, waiting. With a grunt of resignation, Declan motioned him in. "Bring it here." Declan didn't offer the boy, Leo, a seat. He simply took the scooter, his hands moving over the twisted frame with an unnerving combination of gentleness and authority. Leo watched, mesmerized. It wasn't just a repair. It was an assessment, an autopsy. Declan's fingers traced the stress fractures in the aluminum, his thumb testing the play in the steering column. He didn't just see a broken toy. He saw a story of impact, force, and flawed design. "You hit the curb at an angle," Declan stated, not looking up, "probably leaning too far right. The fork isn't designed to take a lateral shock like that. It's cheap pot metal." Leo's eyes widened. "How did you know?" Declan didn't answer. He hoisted the scooter onto his workbench, the muscles in his arms and back cording with the effort. What followed was a masterclass in precision. He didn't just hammer the wheel straight. He disassembled the entire front assembly, laying out each bearing, washer, and nut in a neat row on a clean cloth. He explained in his gruff, clipped sentences how the uneven wear on the bearings indicated a persistent imbalance, how a quarter turn too tight on the compression bolt could ruin the ride. He used calipers to measure the alignment, making adjustments that were invisible to the naked eye. He worked with a quiet, intense focus that Leo had only ever seen on TV documentaries about watchmakers or bomb disposal experts. It was more than fixing, it was understanding. He was making the scooter not just functional but perfect. The next day, Leo returned, this time with a friend whose bicycle chain kept slipping. Then came a girl with a skateboard that had a persistent wobble. Soon, Declan's garage became an unofficial after-school clubhouse. The kids, a ragtag group from the neighborhood, would bring their battered equipment, ostensibly for repairs, but their real purpose was to watch him work. They'd sit on overturned buckets and old tires, silent and attentive, as Declan diagnosed the mechanical ailments of their childhoods. He remained aloof, his tone perpetually gruff. He never asked their names, never offered a smile. Yet he never turned them away. A part of him, a part he refused to acknowledge, found a strange, sterile comfort in their presence. They didn't look at him with pity, the way adults did. They looked at him with something else, something he couldn't quite name. They looked at him like he could see things no one else could. The silence of his garage was now punctuated by the soft whir of bicycle wheels and the quiet awe of children. It was a change he hadn't asked for, but it was happening all the same. The unofficial name of their team was the Oak Street Wildcats, a title far grander than their actual performance. They were a team rich in enthusiasm but bankrupt in skill, a chaotic whirlwind of airballs and clumsy fouls on the cracked asphalt of the local park court. Their season in the community league was a string of embarrassing losses, each one chipping away at their morale until it was almost gone. One sweltering Thursday afternoon, after a particularly brutal 42-12 defeat, Leo and three of his teammates trudged to Declan's garage. The usual post-game energy was gone, replaced by a heavy, defeated silence. They found him meticulously cleaning a carburetor, his hands steady, his focus absolute. Leo took a deep breath, the air in the garage thick with the smell of solvent and his own fear. "Declan," he began, his voice smaller than he intended. The other boys shuffled their feet behind him, a nervous posse of support. Declan didn't look up. "If it's broken, put it on the bench." It's not a thing," Leo stammered. "It's us. The team, we're broken." That got Declan's attention. He slowly raised his head, his gray eyes narrowing. "We want you to be our coach," Leo blurted out, the words tumbling out in a rush before his courage could fail. You see how things are supposed to work. You see all the little things that are wrong. We think you could, fix us." The silence that followed was heavy and absolute. The humming of the fluorescent light seemed to roar in the sudden void. Declan stared at them, his face a mask of disbelief that quickly curdled into something dark and painful. It was as if they had reached inside his chest and touched the raw, exposed nerve of his past. "Coach!" The word was a harsh, bitter rasp. He slammed the carburetor down on the bench with a deafening clang that made the boys jump. For the first time they saw not just coldness in his eyes but a deep, volcanic anger. "Look at me," he snarled, gesturing sharply at his wheelchair. "What are you not seeing? Am I going to run drills? Am I going to demonstrate a layup?" The questions were daggers aimed as much at himself as at them. The humiliation of his paralysis, a constant, dull ache, flared into a searing inferno. "Get out," he commanded, his voice low and trembling with a fury they had never imagined. "All of you, get out of my garage, now." They fled without another word. The hope that had carried them there shattered into a million pieces. The garage door slammed shut behind them, plunging Declan back into a silence that was now more suffocating than ever before. The next day, the kids didn't come back to the garage. The silence Declan had once craved now felt heavy and accusatory, thick with the ghost of their hasty retreat. He tried to lose himself in the intricate gears of a vintage 10-speed bike, but his focus was a phantom. His mind, a traitorous projectionist, kept replaying the image of Leo's face, the hope draining from it like air from a punctured tire. He felt a familiar, bitter taste in his mouth, the taste of a hope he himself had killed. Late in the afternoon, a rhythmic thumping sound of a basketball on asphalt began to intrude from outside, stubbornly persistent. Annoyed at the intrusion and even more annoyed at his own curiosity, he wheeled himself to the garage's side window, a grimy pane of glass that looked out over the park. There they were, the Wildcats. They were on the court, engaged in a clumsy, leaderless practice. It was a beautiful, chaotic mess. A tall, lanky kid was attempting three-pointers with a form so flat it looked like he was heaving a shot put. Leo was trying to direct traffic, but his teammates moved with the cohesive strategy of startled pigeons. Declan couldn't look away. Something deep within him, a dormant, almost forgotten part of his brain, began to stir against his will. It was the mind of a point guard, the floor general. It was the part of him that didn't just see players, but saw spacing, angles, and probabilities. It started as an involuntary twitch, a diagnostic reflex. That kid's dribble is too high, Declan thought, his eyes locking onto a small, quick boy. He's exposing the ball on every crossover. A decent defender would strip him clean. Why is the big kid camping out at the three-point line? He's useless there. His center of gravity is perfect for a low-post game. Get him on the block, teach him a drop step and a baby hook. It's simple physics. He watched them attempt a fast break. It was a disaster in 3 acts. A bad outlet pass, a fumbled catch, and a wild shot that bounced off the side of the backboard. Declan found himself physically flinching, his hands gripping the arms of his chair. He muttered critiques under his breath, his voice a low growl. No, no, fill the lanes. The point guard takes the middle, wings spread out. It's not complicated. The next day, the same sound pulled him back to the window. They were there again. He saw them try to run a set play, something they'd clearly seen on television. It involved a series of clumsy screens that resulted in 2 of them colliding and falling in a heap, while the ball handler, utterly confused, simply traveled. Declan instinctively reached for a piece of cardboard, his fingers itching for a piece of chalk to diagram the correct spacing, to show them how the screen setter needs to roll to the basket to create the second option. He caught himself, his hand hovering over the cardboard, and clenched it into a fist. He was angry at them for being so bad and furious with himself for caring. On the 3rd day, the energy on the court had changed. The initial enthusiasm had curdled into visible frustration. Passes were sloppy, arguments flared over missed shots. Then came the moment that broke through his wall of bitterness. Leo, his face streaked with dirt and sweat, gathered his dejected teammates in a huddle. Declan could see his mouth moving, his expression earnest and pleading. The team broke the huddle with a half-hearted cheer and tried one last time. The play ended with a lazy pass being easily intercepted and taken for an uncontested layup by an imaginary opponent. One of the boys, the lanky shooter, threw the ball down in disgust and slumped onto the cracked asphalt, burying his head in his hands. The others just stood there, hands on hips, chests heaving, defeated. It was the sight of their extinguished hope that finally pierced Declan's armor. He wasn't just seeing bad basketball anymore. He was seeing a reflection of himself, a deep love for something being strangled by a feeling of powerlessness. He looked from their slumped shoulders to the dusty basketball in the corner of his garage. It wasn't a monument to his past anymore. It was a tool. And out there was a beautiful, complex machine, running with sand in its gears, about to break down for good. The instinct to fix it, the maddening, undeniable, overwhelming instinct, was finally stronger than his pain. The next afternoon, the rhythmic thumping from the court began as usual. But this time, something else broke the routine. The loud, metallic rattle of Declan's roll-up garage door opening all the way. The sunlight that flooded the space felt foreign, almost aggressive. He took a deep, steadying breath, his hands gripping the push rims of his wheelchair, and rolled out into the bright, open air. He crossed the 50 yards of sun-bleached grass that separated his fortress from their court. The wheels of his chair bumped over the uneven ground, each jolt a small, physical reminder of the world he had shut out. As he reached the edge of the asphalt, the kids stopped dead. The ball bounced away, forgotten. They stared at him, a silent, stunned audience, their expressions a mixture of apprehension and fragile hope. Declan didn't offer a greeting or an apology. He didn't smile. His gaze was as intense and analytical as it was when he looked at a broken engine. He pointed a long, grease-stained finger. Not a finger, he realized, but an old, splintered mop handle he'd grabbed on his way out, at the tall kid who loved to shoot threes. "You," he barked. The kid flinched. "What's your name?" Sam," he mumbled. "Sam," Declan said, his voice carrying across the court with an authority it hadn't held in years. "Your shot is flat because your elbow is out. You're pushing the ball, not shooting it. From now on, you don't shoot from further than 5 feet. You're going to do form shooting until your arm wants to fall off. Got it. Sam just nodded, wide-eyed. Declan then wheeled himself onto the cracked court, the chair's narrow tires navigating the fissures. He pulled a thick piece of chalk from a pouch on his chair, the kind mechanics use to mark tires. He bent down, his movements practiced and efficient, and began to draw on the ground. Lines, circles, arrows. He sketched out a basic pick-and-roll, his chalk lines sharp and precise. "Leo," he commanded, "you're the point guard. Your crossover is a liability, it's slow and high. You look like a dancing goose. From now on, you dribble with a purpose. Your job is to get here." He tapped a spot on the court with the mop handle. "You use the screen from Sam. No, not like that. Set your feet, create a wall. And you read the defense. 1, 2, 3 options, that's it. This isn't art class, it's geometry." He didn't raise his voice, but every word was packed with an irrefutable certainty. He couldn't run with them, couldn't demonstrate a single move. But he didn't need to. He used the mop handle as an extension of his arm, pointing out defensive positions, correcting footwork, dictating the flow of movement. He was a conductor and they were his orchestra. He saw the game in its purest form, a system of moving parts, of cause and effect, of force and counterforce. The kids listened, rapt. For the first time, the chaos on the court had a center. They had a voice of command, a brain that could see the whole picture. They fumbled, they made mistakes, but they tried. They ran the simple play he drew, and on the third attempt it worked. The pass was crisp, the layup clean, a small, perfect moment of execution. In that moment, watching them, Declan wasn't the man in the wheelchair. He wasn't the broken athlete or the reclusive mechanic. He was a coach. And in the eyes of the Oak Street Wildcats, shining with a light he hadn't seen in a decade, he saw that they knew it too. Under Declan's command, the Oak Street Wildcats were reborn. Practice was no longer a chaotic free-for-all. It was a laboratory. He was relentless, breaking down every aspect of the game into its fundamental components. He taught them about defensive slides until their legs burned, about the physics of a bounce pass, about the critical importance of boxing out for a rebound. He gave them structure, discipline, and most importantly, a belief that they weren't just a collection of kids, but a single, functioning unit. Their first game under his leadership was a revelation. They lost, but only by 6 points. For the Wildcats, it felt like a victory. They had a plan. They moved with purpose. The following week, they won. It was a sloppy, hard-fought victory, but as the final buzzer sounded, the kids mobbed Declan's chair, their cheers echoing across the park. He allowed himself a small, almost imperceptible smile. The wins started to pile up. Declan's strategies were unconventional, tailored precisely to his team's limited strengths. He turned Sam, the former three-point chucker, into a formidable low-post presence. He harnessed Leo's court vision, designing plays that relied on clever passes rather than one-on-one skill. They became known as the Garage Gang, a team that won not with overwhelming talent, but with superior tactics and unbreakable discipline. They battled their way through the Community League playoffs, each game a testament to their transformation. Finally, they found themselves in a place they had never dreamed of, the regional championship final. Their opponents were the Ravens, the undefeated, two-time defending champions from the affluent side of town. The Ravens were bigger, faster, and more skilled at every position. The game was a brutal war of attrition. The Ravens' raw athleticism was overwhelming, but Declan's strategic genius kept the Wildcats in the fight. He called timeouts at crucial moments, calming their nerves, drawing new plays in the dirt with his chalk. He was a master chess player, sacrificing a pawn to save a rook, always thinking 2 moves ahead. With 10 seconds left on the clock, the Wildcats were down by 1 point. The Ravens had just scored, and the air was thick with the certainty of their victory. Declan called his final timeout. The kids huddled around his wheelchair, their faces slick with sweat, their chests heaving. He didn't yell. He looked each of them in the eye. "This is just a machine," he said, his voice calm and steady as he drew on his clipboard. "We know how it works. He diagrammed a play of breathtaking complexity, a series of screens, misdirections, and cuts designed to look like one thing, but achieve another entirely. It was a play that depended on perfect timing, on every player trusting the system. It was a Declan special. Execute, he said simply. That's all. They broke the huddle, the whistle blew. Leo took the inbound pass. Everything unfolded exactly as the chalk lines had predicted. A screen for Sam drew the defense in. A fake handoff pulled the center out of position. In the chaos, the smallest kid on the team, the one Declan had chided for his high dribble, made a backdoor cut. The pass from Leo was perfect. The ball left his fingertips just as the buzzer blared. A high, arching shot that seemed to hang in the air for an eternity before falling cleanly through the net. The sound of the final buzzer was swallowed by a split second of stunned silence, followed by an eruption. The small crowd of parents and friends who had followed the Wildcats' improbable journey leaped to their feet, screaming. But the players on the court didn't celebrate with each other. They didn't chase after the hero who had made the final shot. As one, they turned and charged, a stampede of pure joy straight for the sideline. They swarmed Declan's wheelchair, a chaotic, laughing, crying mob of teenage boys. They surrounded him, patting his back, ruffling his hair, their jubilant shouts of "Coach! Coach! We did it!" ringing in his ears. Leo, his face a mess of tears and sweat, pushed through the crowd. In his hands he held the small, gleaming gold-colored championship trophy. With a reverence usually reserved for a holy relic, he placed it gently on Declan's lap. Declan looked down at the trophy resting on his useless legs. He looked up at the circle of ecstatic faces beaming down at him, their eyes shining with adoration and gratitude. A dam inside him, a wall of bitterness and grief he had spent a decade building, finally broke. A warmth spread through his chest, overwhelming and unfamiliar. For the first time since the accident, Declan let the tears come freely, not in silent, solitary grief, but out in the open, under the bright lights of the basketball court. They were tears of joy, of release, of a profound and overwhelming sense of belonging. He was no longer Declan, the broken athlete. He was no longer the hermit in the garage. He was Coach Declan. These kids, with their broken scooters and their clumsy faith, hadn't just asked him to fix their team. They had reminded him how to fix himself.